So we were ending off here with the idea of creator or matter, and we started off at a place of what is thought, can we know things absolutely? We decided we can know things absolutely, we can know truth absolutely. We went over the laws of thought. We went over that if we can exist, and we do exist, and we don't have to exist, we have to have an explanation. And so we wanted to find out what that explanation was, and so we went over the cosmological argument, the Kalam cosmological argument, and that's how we got these different points for what a creator or what matter, what the cause has to be like for us to be here. So we're not at a place where we found what the creator or what matter is like. We haven't chosen either of these. We kind of went through them, and we kind of decided this one had a little more evidence than this one for it. But I want to go over and give a little bit more evidence for both of them, just to see how they react to a few different situations before we move on to choosing either one of them and going into that whole realm. So the first thing that I want to talk about when we're talking about how these react to a few different situations is the fine-tuning argument. And pretty much all scientists, whether Christian or whatever worldview they have, agree that there is fine-tuning to the universe, especially people who look through a telescope or microscopes. They see the biggest parts of the universe and the smallest parts of the universe, and they can all agree there's a fine-tuning that exists within all of us and to the biggest stage of all the planets and gravity and all of that kind of stuff. So there just seems to be such a fine-tuning, even to the way our bodies work, how DNA works together, that you can read it like a book. The way that our whole bodies are built, or even all of life, is based off of carbon. Just the specific way that carbon is created, that it can bond so well and create so many other bonds, that we even have the ability to sustain life through it, is so fine-tuned it's ridiculous. So they would all agree that fine-tuning exists, but both of these worldviews would differ on their answer for what fine-tuning is. So we're taking the constant of fine-tuning and applying it to both of these worldviews just to see how they would answer this question. So, of course, the creator aspect would probably say, well, fine-tuning sort of gives the logical conclusion of there being a creator, right? If there's a creator, he would have to be orderly and complex in order to create orderly and complex beings. We see order and complexity in the universe, so we can infer that it would just be logical that if we see fine-tuning in the universe, that it would make sense that an intelligent design created that thing, a conscious, orderly, complex being created that. It would just make sense. It's not really a hard jump to make, that there would be order and complexity in the universe, fine-tuning. From the matter aspect, it's actually a really interesting answer, and a lot of you have heard it or seen it in a lot of Marvel movies and science fiction movies, maybe read it in a book or heard a lecture on it, and that's the idea of a multiverse. And maybe you thought it was silly, or you thought, oh, it was kind of like dumb, like they did it in the last Avengers movie, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. But actually, this is the scientific logical conclusion from the perspective of matter. The only way you get fine-tuning in the universe is a multiverse. And what a multiverse is an infinite number of universes existing, giving the universe that we're in, the orderly one that we're in now, the probability of happening. So it's normal that chaos doesn't lead to order, but chaos can sometimes lead to order in really rare circumstances. So if you had enough universes, say the universe or matter is infinite, this could happen an infinite amount of times, so that if anything is possible to happen, it would have to happen at least once. So that's why we're here in this worldview, because anything that could happen would have to happen at least once given an infinite number of universes. And this is the commonly held belief, and you can even hold that belief if you believe in a creator too. It would work for this worldview. I know there are some scientists that are believers that I've heard talk about also believing in a multiverse. It is the only logical conclusion if you don't want to believe in a creator that we exist like this. God could have done it that way as well, or a creator. But this is the main common view held by matter, and that's how they explain the fine-tuning argument. The last thing I want to talk about when we're going through sort of these two things is how they came about. So we're going to talk about evolution a little bit and irreducible complexity. Irreducible complexity is the idea that there are things so complex in the created order that they cannot be evolved to or devolved to. An example of this would be like the human eye. The human eye needs a lot of things to be able to see anything. It needs lenses, it needs muscles for those lenses, it needs light receptors, it needs all of these different parts to work together to be able to even receive light at the right angle, to be able to not inversely flip it so the brain can actually see things upright. It needs all these things to work together, and the way that maybe someone from a matter perspective would deal with this is they would say that all of those parts were necessary to create the eye, but they all had a condition that existed before the end goal of the eye that made them necessary. So they all had a function predating the eye having its main function that caused them to be useful. So if irreducible complexity would be an argument against evolution, their answer to that from an evolutionary perspective or a matter perspective, that matter is infinite, would be that those things had a pre-existing condition that caused them to be necessary. My only question is, what is that condition? Because I don't see one necessarily. And I've had some really interesting conversations with some people who believe this that didn't convince me a lot. And I can tell you, it's obvious that I'm biased towards this opinion. But I don't know why you would need light receptors, like being half evolved, and muscles to open and close an eye, and an iris, and iris lenses to protect the eye, and all of that kind of stuff, if it wasn't for the main goal of having an eye. Like, what is the mediary function of all of those things, if not to just have an eye in its completeness or in its complexity? So another example of irreducible complexity, if you weren't satisfied with that one, would be the idea of a giraffe. And this is more abstract, I guess. But a giraffe as an entire animal has a ridiculous blood pressure. Like its heart is huge because it has such a tall neck and such long legs. It has to shoot blood down to those legs and shoot blood up to its neck at such a powerful rate so that it can actually think, it can bend down, and the blood flow still works, the head doesn't explode and stuff like that. If you take away its short leg, or you take away its long legs, or even its long neck, you get one of two things happening. Either the head explodes or has a heart attack because the blood pressure is so great, or you lower the heart's, the rate that it beats at, or the pressure that it beats at. And in that case, if you still had a head or legs that were the same length, the animal would faint, or probably wouldn't even make it out of infancy in the first place. There could be counter-arguments to this as well, which are sort of interesting and are a little more hypothetical, because this is obviously a hypothetical. But they would say that the animal needed to evolve slowly to get to that place where it then had like a long enough neck to be a giraffe and long enough legs to be a giraffe and like was a full giraffe, right? The problem that I see with that in all of life coming to be in that way is that where do the mistakes go? How do you pass along genetic information from mistakes? Because scientists will obviously do trial and error to find, like, say, the coronavirus vaccine. They'll do trial and error over and over to see if they can finally create a correct vaccine. They'll do tests on it, right, to see how effective they can get it to be. With an animal evolving, say a giraffe evolves, and it's like, subconsciously, of course, just in its DNA, is like, I want to be able to reach this fruit that's on this tall tree. I need to get taller. In order for me to get taller, my legs need to grow longer. My heart needs to get bigger to affect how much blood needs to be pumped to my head, at what level, and stuff like that. Everything would have to work together in a perfect way for it to get to that stage. And the problem is, if the DNA ever made a mistake in maybe evolving the heart too large or the legs too small, you either have the animal's head exploding, having a heart attack, or if the heart's too small, fainting, and in most cases probably not even making it to birth. Most likely the animal would probably be stillborn. So there's the possibility, I guess, like we were talking about the multiverse, that if anything could happen, it has to happen in that way. So I guess you could explain that phenomenon of an animal evolving in such a perfect way that its legs, its heart, and its head, and its body all evolved together to be taller, to reach a tree, in a way that it didn't die and not reach that stage. You could explain it like that, but the thing that I don't understand is, where does that genetic information go? when I was talking about how scientists do experiments, they take the evidence of what went wrong in the past trial and apply it to do it differently in a new trial, right? For DNA, if DNA evolves incorrectly, it ends. It doesn't pass on that incorrect information so that it can make a better decision later on. It just then goes to the next animal and they try to do it in their way. So this could still work. It could definitely still work when you're talking about the probability of it happening. If everything is probable and has to happen at least once, then it could happen. But it doesn't seem super probable to me. So I would, for both of these instances, in fine-tuning and in irreducible complexity, I would say they work for both, but make more sense in the aspect of a creator existing. And where I want to leave off with just this topic in general, I seem to see more evidence towards the creator being the cause rather than matter being the cause. And I know lots of people who disagree with me, and that's super cool. I don't think this is a dumb point of view. As I've tried to display, all of the arguments we've given for both sides technically work for both of these perspectives. I think they work better for a creator, but it's not an illogical standpoint to believe that matter is the cause of everything. But I think it's more probable that a creator would be the reason that we're here. So from this point on, I'm just going to move forward with this assumption, that we all would agree with this. Would anybody want to object to that? Moving forward, just going on the basis of a creator is the cause of everything rather than matter. And if we don't have any objections, I'll move on. Nice. So I'm going to use this eraser. If we're moving forward with the assumption that a creator is the thing that caused everything, is the cause of all things, and these are sort of the things that a creator can do, or the aspects of its personality, even its nature, we can infer some things about who we are and why we're here. We reverse engineered kind of who we are to get beauty and to get complexity, just that we're complex, the universe is complex. The universe is orderly, so a God that created it would probably be a God of order, a God of complexity, a God of beauty. The God would have to be conscious in order to cause us, because nothing that is unconscious ever creates anything unprompted. If that makes sense. Technically, the prompting would be the thing that created. So we're going to move into what we think about this, less based off of how we're reverse engineering the world, and more from a standpoint of these aspects. I guess I should do one more reverse engineering before we continue. And I think that would be the idea of family or community and relationship. It seems like we as human beings are relational beings. I'm going to read a study from the Journal of American Heart Association. Just let me read it real fast. A new study of social isolation published in the Journal of the American Heart Association, which tracked more than 1,600 people living with heart failure. And this is a quote from the study. "We've known for a while that being alone is a deadly and dangerous condition. Other scholars have estimated that regardless of your heart health, social isolation can increase your risk of death anywhere from 50 to 90%. Being socially disconnected can also up your risk of developing high blood pressure or inflammation and make you more aggressive." But from this new study, researchers looked at a group of patients from rural parts of Minnesota, all dealing with heart failure. They found that those Minnesotans who described their lives as highly socially isolated, meeting with no one on a daily basis, were 3.5 times more likely to die than people who were suffering from one of the exact same heart problems, but who reported having enough social support and connections. People who don't have any regular human contact were also more likely to be hospitalized, made more frequent visits to doctors, and were more likely to be rushed to the emergency room than their peers. So it seems like if we reverse engineered beauty and, oh man, I forgot caring on there. I think I wrote beauty / caring last time. If we inferred beauty from this list because of the beauty we see around us, and that beauty wouldn't just be to further our evolution, then we surmised last time that the creator or matter or creator must have cared for us in order to give us those abilities. And I think we can also infer this when we're talking about family or relationships, in that God or this creator created us to be relational. And we might even be able to infer that this creator would be relational if given us the ability to relate. It seems like anything that's caring wouldn't want to care about that thing unless it wanted a relationship with it. Like if I had the ability to create life that had free will and could love, why would I create it like that unless I wanted to have relationship with it? So it seems like because we can see that we die or that we decrease in health rapidly if we don't have relationships, that must be how this creator created us. And it's possible that we could backtrack that all the way to this creator could be relational. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit, but I'm going to put relational up there as well, just for now. We'll go over it more in a second, but relational. Does that make sense to everybody? Anybody have any questions before we move on a little bit? We're almost out of time already. Before I move on, we're gonna kind of go over some world religions and see what world religion fits this list the best way. But as we're going over those world religions, I want to leave out one type of evidence. We're going to go over a few different types of evidence in the next couple of weeks. We're going to go over philosophical evidence, biological evidence, contextual evidence, and like manuscript evidence of the different religions. But one thing I want to leave out is experiential evidence, because all of the different religions claim to have their own experiential evidence and could make strong claims just based off of that. So it seems to kind of be a moot point, so I'm not going to use a lot of experiential evidence. You know, you have Christians that say they have healings and signs and wonders and miracles, and you have Buddhist monks who say they can astral project, and Mormons who say they can show you like a burning in your heart, show you God's real. There seem to be evidences of experiential encounters throughout all of these religions to show their claim that they have the correct belief in a creator. And of course, they all want to claim that they have the correct belief in a creator because they all claim objectivity. They all claim that their one way to salvation is the right way. Almost none of them, except for maybe Hinduism, would claim that all ways could lead to this creator, that this creator revealed himself, and that all ways lead to him. Most of them are fairly exclusive. Moving from this place of that God is caring and wants a relationship, any relationship cannot exist without communication. So to have relations with something, you have to communicate it with it in some way. That's why we're going to move into different religions, because we must think that if this thing is caring and relational, they would also want to communicate in order to have that relationship with its creation, in order to be caring for its creation. So we would try to find the best way that, if any way, a creator of whatever this infinite being would be able to communicate with the kind of finite beings we are. We each have to kind of perceive through our society what that communication would be. And it's pretty obvious to us. We see world religions all around us, all over the world, different people claiming to know who God is, or God spoke to them in this way. They created this religion. Some religions maybe not having founders, but there's a lot of different world religions we can kind of sift through to see who this God is. So let's go through a list of them real quick. So first we have Buddhism, and I don't think Buddhism would work for this creator, because Buddhism is more of a philosophy rather than a religion. Even though it is considered a religion in many different cultures, it's kind of mixed with animism, which is the belief that there are gods in everything, or everything is a god. So if you mix Buddhism with animism, I still don't think you could get this kind of a god, because the Buddhist ideology would say there isn't a conscious God, but rather we all are a part of the conscious God. You know, their main mantra is that life is suffering, and you want to achieve the highest form of suffering, which is enlightenment, and then join the unconscious oneness of everything. So it wouldn't be conscious, and it also wouldn't be supernatural. It could be a lot of these other things, but these two things it definitely couldn't be. Relational, I don't think it could be either, although I think that could be argued. So I don't think Buddhism is a good choice for this creator. Yes? Okay, not a question. Hinduism is next, and Hinduism is more interesting because Hinduism, or at least most Hindus, especially in India, believe that all religions can be encompassed under Hinduism, and that the God they serve is actually just one God, which is Brahman. Even though you'll see temples and shrines to all these other gods, they technically only believe in one God. They would believe that me and you and all those gods are technically just part of Brahman, and their worship to those gods is technically worship to God in himself, but that God is, in fact, everything. So all world religions are just a revealing of who God is. It doesn't really matter that they have absolute claims on themselves. They still would believe that all of those things are still God. They would all be Brahman. The problem with this, in this form of a creator, is that it still isn't conscious, and it still isn't supernatural. So I don't think that it can fit this as well. Also, there's some people who would argue it's not infinite, but I think most Hindus would argue that it is infinite. But I don't think Hinduism falls under this category. In fact, I think Hinduism and animism and Buddhism would all fall under this matter category that we listed better than this creator category, because technically everything would be one thing, and just like we were talking about with matter, if everything is just matter, and matter is the infinite thing, matter wouldn't be conscious or supernatural. It would be natural and unconscious. Both of those religions lead to an endpoint of being natural and unconscious as well, so they would work in this matter category that I erased earlier. I think better than this creator category, having those philosophies. Taoism is a philosophy in China as well that's sort of similar to Buddhism in a way that it's a philosophy and less a religion. And there's no conscious God in that belief system either. It's also an unconscious God, so we can say the same things about this, that it would work more in this matter category of being unconscious rather than the creator category. And we're going through this really fast, I know. The last three I want to talk about, I think, would work for this creator category, and those are Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. In Islam, I think all of these things would work. The caring one is interesting, but Allah would be caring to an extent and relational. So I would say that one would work, and Judaism and Christianity all go off of, and Islam all go off of the same Old Testament or the Torah. And so their definitions of God are fairly similar. So I think that all of those could work for this category of a God that cares and is relational. Yeah. So I think as we get close to ending off everything, I would say those three things are the three religions we can kind of focus on, because they seem to meet our criteria for a creator more than the other ones. So we would have Christianity, I'll just say like C for Christianity, and then Judaism, and then Islam. And so those are the three that we can move forward with. And as we end, I want to say one thing. Actually, I want to say one thing to kind of cap this, and that's the idea of why would God want to create? So when asked this question, why do you think God would want to create? Not necessarily based on these. You have to use these because they're part of who we think the creator is. But does anybody have any ideas of why God would want to create beings outside of himself, and himself being infinite and being all of these things? And anybody can shout out an answer if you have any ideas. I'll give you a second to think about it. Why would God want to create, or unpromptedly want to create, because he is conscious? If God is infinite and timeless and all-powerful and all-aware and all-knowing, he doesn't need any more information, so he doesn't need to do any experiments by creating. You know, he doesn't need to experiment on us or maybe use us for humor and us doing stupid things. He would already know all the things because he's all-knowing. He wouldn't need any of that. He'd already be aware of it. He wouldn't need us to gain him any more power because he already is all of the power. That wouldn't make sense as well. He wouldn't need anything from us because he's infinite. He is all things. So there's nothing we could gain him by being slaves for him or something like that. There doesn't seem to be a lot of reasons why God would want to create. And again, we got caring and beautiful and relational from reverse engineering that we're here, right? So we can't necessarily infer those things right away from these things because we got them from us just simply being here. We're talking about why this being would want to create of himself. And I think if we didn't have these things on the board, there wouldn't be a reason for God to want to create. But because we're here, we can see that these things would be a part of God. But the problem is, how can God be caring and relational extrinsically, outside of himself? Because if he's everything, and if he has all things, he doesn't seem to need anything, and he is one thing, then he has no relational part of himself because he has no relationship or doesn't relate to anything because he is everything. He would have no relational qualities outside of himself, so he wouldn't have a reason to create anything, which means he wouldn't care or be relational outside of himself because he would just be one thing. So this would be the viewpoint you would take if you just believed that God or the Creator was one thing, which is what Islam believes, that God is one thing. The difference between Islam and Judaism and Christianity is that both of these religions or worldviews don't think that God is one thing, but rather that he is three persons inside of one thing. So this technically wouldn't work because Islam doesn't have a reason for why God would create. They would probably still say that he's caring and relational and that's why he'd want to create, but a being that's infinite and has nothing to relate to has no reason to be relational because it doesn't exist. Literally, relationship wouldn't exist because everything that exists would be God, and if God's not relationship, then relationships don't exist. So I don't think this would still fit with our worldview. I think these two things would be the only thing that would fit with our worldview because the Creator would have to be three things. In these two religions, they would say the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit having perfect harmony with each other in themselves, being relational while still being infinite. And while it is a paradox, it is the only logical explanation for why a God would want to create in being relational. So God must be relational and must care in order to want to create while still being infinite. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, that's where we're going to end today.